I never thought I'd become the family ghost. That's what happens when you marry into the Caldwell family. You either conform or disappear. For 3 years, I tried to be what they wanted. Quiet, agreeable, invisible. But even ghosts eventually find ways to make themselves heard. The first time I realized something was wrong was during our engagement dinner. James and I had been dating for 2 years when he proposed. I was ecstatic, floating on air as we walked into his parents' sprawling colonial home for the celebration dinner. His mother, Eleanor, greeted us at the door with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "James, darling," she exclaimed, pulling him into a hug while I stood awkwardly to the side. When she finally turned to me, her smile dimmed. "Rachel, that dress is interesting." I glanced down at my carefully chosen navy blue cocktail dress, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you for hosting tonight," I offered, trying to break the ice. The dining room was beautifully set, with the family's heirloom china, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier. James's father, Robert, his sister, Melissa, and her husband were already seated. As we entered, Robert stood to clap James on the shoulder. "There's my boy! The future Dr. Caldwell," he boomed, referring to James's final year of medical residency. I waited for an acknowledgement, but none came. Instead, Eleanor directed James to sit beside his father while gesturing for me to take a seat at the far end of the table, separated from my fiancé by his sister and brother-in-law. Throughout dinner, I tried to join the conversation, offering comments about our wedding plans or asking questions about family traditions. Each time, Eleanor would smoothly interrupt or change the subject. When I mentioned my ideas for the ceremony, she laughed lightly. "Oh, we don't do things that way in this family," she said, exchanging knowing glances with Melissa. "The Caldwell weddings follow tradition. I've already spoken with the coordinator at the club." James squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, Rachel and I haven't decided on anything yet." "Of course, dear," Eleanor replied, not looking at me. "But there are expectations when you marry a Caldwell." I swallowed my discomfort, telling myself it was just pre-wedding jitters on everyone's part. James loved me. That was what mattered. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in darkroom chemicals. At first, it was small things, Eleanor forgetting to include me in family emails or texts about gatherings. Then came the seating arrangements at family dinners, always placing me far from James, often at a small side table when space was limited. During conversations, my comments would hang in the air, unacknowledged, until someone else spoke and the moment passed. 6 months after our wedding, James's cousin had a baby. The entire family gathered at the hospital, cooing over the newest Caldwell. I stood in the doorway, watching as they passed the infant around. James cradled the baby expertly, his pediatric training showing, and looked up with a smile. "Rachel should hold her too, she's great with kids." Eleanor stepped forward quickly. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary. The baby's getting tired, and we shouldn't overwhelm her with too many strangers." After being married to James for half a year and dating him for 2 before that, in the car ride home, I finally said something. "Your mother called me a stranger today." James sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "She didn't mean it like that. She's just protective of family." He reached over to pat my hand. "Of course you are. Mom just needs time to adjust. She's set in her ways." But time didn't help. At Thanksgiving, Eleanor accidentally set one less place at the table, forcing James to scramble for an extra chair and place setting. At Christmas, everyone received personalized stockings, except me. Mine was a generic red one from the drugstore, hastily filled with sample-sized lotions, while the others received thoughtful, expensive gifts. When I pointed these things out to James, he would minimize them. "Mom's just forgetful," or "You're being too sensitive," or my personal favorite, "That's just how she is." I started keeping a journal, documenting each slight, each exclusion, not to show James, he clearly didn't want to see it, but to convince myself I wasn't imagining things. The entries piled up. April 15th, family photo at Easter. Eleanor asked me to take the picture instead of being in it. May 30th, James's birthday dinner. Place cards for everyone except me. Had to ask where to sit. June 12th. Eleanor forgot to tell us about Melissa's promotion party until the day after. The worst part wasn't the Caldwell's behavior, it was James's response. My once supportive partner had transformed into someone who constantly asked me to keep the peace and not make waves. He'd grown up watching his mother manipulate everyone around her, and he'd learned that the path of least resistance was to give in. One night, after Eleanor had called to invite James, just James, to a family vacation in Martha's Vineyard, I confronted him. James ran his hands through his hair. "What do you want me to do, Rachel? Start a family war? Mom's not going to change. So I'm just supposed to accept being treated like I don't exist for the rest of our lives?" That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how long I could live as a ghost in my own marriage. The breaking point came during what should have been one of the happiest moments of our lives. After 2 years of marriage, I was pregnant. James and I were ecstatic, spending evenings discussing names and decorating the nursery. When we told his parents over dinner at their house, Robert offered a genuine smile and congratulations. Eleanor's reaction was different. James frowned. "Mom, we're excited about this. You're going to be a grandmother." Eleanor dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Of course, dear. I just hope the child takes after our side of the family. The Caldwells have always been exceptionally bright." I felt my cheeks burn but said nothing, determined not to give her the satisfaction. Later, as we prepared to leave, Eleanor pulled James aside while I gathered my coat. I couldn't hear everything, but her words drifted over clearly enough. Paternity test wouldn't be unreasonable. The drive home was silent. I waited for James to say something, to acknowledge the horrible thing his mother had insinuated. He kept his eyes on the road. Something inside me snapped. "She suggested I'm cheating on you, that this baby might not be yours. How can you say she didn't mean anything? She's from a different generation, Rachel. She says things without thinking." I stared at him, this stranger who wore my husband's face. "No. She knows exactly what she's saying. And you..." My voice broke. "You're letting her." James pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. "Look, I know Mom can be difficult, but she's still my mother. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to choose," I said quietly. "Choose us, your family. Me and this baby." That night, I slept in the guest room, my hand resting on my still flat stomach, promising our child they would never feel invisible. The next morning, I found James in the kitchen, staring into his coffee cup. "I've been thinking," he said without looking up. "Maybe we should all go to family counseling. You, me, and my parents. Clear the air before the baby comes. Mom says she's willing to try if you are. She thinks you might be experiencing some hormonal issues that are making you oversensitive." I walked out of the kitchen, my mind suddenly clear. This wasn't just about me anymore. I had a child to protect, a child who deserved better than to grow up watching their mother be erased. That afternoon, I called my sister Kate. "I need a place to stay for a while," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I spent the next week planning, not my exit. That was simple enough. What required strategy was ensuring the Caldwells understood exactly what they were losing. First, I gathered evidence. The journal I'd kept, documenting 3 years of systematic exclusion. Text messages where Eleanor forgot to include me in family plans. Photos where I'd been relegated to the edges or asked to be the photographer. Emails where my input on family matters was ignored or dismissed. Then I created a timeline, organizing the incidents chronologically to show the pattern. It wasn't about any single slight. It was about the cumulative effect, the deliberate erasure of my existence. Finally, I wrote letters. One to James, one to Eleanor and Robert, and one to myself, a reminder of why I deserve better. On a Sunday when I knew the entire Caldwell family would be gathered for their monthly dinner, to which I had predictably not been invited, I drove to Eleanor and Robert's house. James would be there, having told me he was going to talk to them about our situation. 3 years of marriage had taught me what that meant. He would listen to his mother's version of events and come home ready to explain why I needed to try harder. I parked across the street, watching as the family cars lined the driveway. My heart pounded as I gathered my materials and walked to the door. I rang the bell, hearing the conversation inside pause. Eleanor opened the door, her surprise quickly masked by a tight smile. "Rachel, we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I said, stepping past her into the foyer. "But I think it's time we had a family meeting." James appeared from the dining room, his face pale. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" The family had gathered in the doorway. Robert, Melissa and her husband, James's aunt and uncle, all watching with varying degrees of curiosity and discomfort. "I've been part of this family for 3 years, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Or rather, I've been adjacent to this family. Never quite included, never quite acknowledged. Eleanor stepped forward. I don't know what you're talking about. If you're feeling left out, perhaps you should make more of an effort too. I have the receipts, Eleanor, I interrupted, pulling out my folder. Every exclusion, every accidental oversight, every dismissal. Would you like me to share them with everyone? The room went silent. James moved toward me, his expression a mix of confusion and alarm. Rachel, please, let's talk about this privately. No, I said firmly. I'm done with private conversations that go nowhere. I'm done being gaslighted into thinking I'm imagining things. I turned to address the whole family. I came here today not to create drama, but to make something very clear. I am leaving James. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. James froze, his face draining of color. I'm leaving, I continued, because I refuse to raise a child in an environment where their mother is treated as invisible, where their father prioritizes keeping the peace over standing up for his family. Eleanor's eyes widened at the mention of the baby. Now, Rachel, you're being dramatic. No one has treated you poorly. And making decisions about my grandchild while you're clearly emotional. Your grandchild, I cut in. Interesting that you claim them now, when just last week you suggested to James that a paternity test wouldn't be unreasonable. The room went deadly quiet. All eyes turned to Eleanor, whose face flushed deep red. You did, I said, and James, instead of defending me, told me you didn't mean anything by it. That's been the pattern from day one. You exclude, dismiss, and insult me, and James makes excuses for you. I turned to my husband, whose face had crumpled. I love you, James. But I love myself too, and our child deserves parents who model self-respect and healthy boundaries. I placed the folder on the entryway table. Here's everything. 3 years of being erased, documented, and dated. I'm not sharing this to hurt anyone, but so there can be no more denials about what's happened. Then I removed my wedding ring and placed it beside the folder. I'll be staying with Kate. You can contact me through her when you're ready to discuss co-parenting arrangements. As I turned to leave, James finally found his voice. Rachel, wait, please, we can fix this. I paused at the door. Can we? Because fixing this would mean acknowledging what's been happening. It would mean standing up to your mother. It would mean choosing your own family over your need for her approval. I walked out, closing the door behind me. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Visibility. I saw myself clearly for the first time since I'd become a Caldwell. Not as the accommodating ghost they'd tried to make me, but as a woman of substance and worth. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't care if they saw me at all. Better, because leaving the Caldwell's house that day broke the spell they'd cast over my life. Living with Kate, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been suppressed, my laugh, my opinions, my right to take up space in a room. Worse, because James's reaction confirmed everything I'd feared. 3 days after I left, he showed up at Kate's apartment, not with an apology or acknowledgement, but with a family therapy brochure. Mom found someone who specializes in family dynamics, he said, standing awkwardly in Kate's living room. She's willing to work on things if you are. I stared at him, this man I'd loved enough to marry, to plan a family with. Did you even read the documentation I left? He shifted uncomfortably. Some of it. But Rachel, those were just misunderstandings. Mom feels terrible that you interpreted things that way. That's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, we're having a baby. We need to try to make this work. I placed a protective hand over my stomach. This baby is exactly why I can't come back without real change. I won't let our child grow up thinking it's normal to be erased, to have their feelings dismissed. Then why did your mother call Kate yesterday to ask if she could host a baby shower without inviting me? She told Kate that since I'm, quote, going through a difficult time, she'd take over the planning, that she'd make sure I got some of the gifts afterward. He left without resolving anything, but the conversation sparked something unexpected. 2 days later, Melissa, James's sister, who had always followed Eleanor's lead in excluding me, showed up at Kate's door. Over coffee at a nearby cafe, Melissa surprised me. I read your documentation, she said, stirring her latte absently. All of it. I never realized, she continued. I mean, I saw some of it happening, but I didn't want to see the pattern. Melissa met my eyes. Because Mom's doing the same thing to my husband, has been for years. I just normalized it because that's how she treated my dad's first wife too. For 3 years in his 20s, no one talks about it. Mom made sure Diane was erased from family history. She paused. just like she's been trying to do with you. That conversation with Melissa cracked open the Caldwell family secrets. Over the next few weeks, other family members reached out. An aunt who'd experienced similar treatment, a cousin who'd witnessed Eleanor's manipulation for years but never spoke up. The family was dividing, not between those who supported me and those who supported Eleanor, but between those willing to acknowledge the truth and those committed to denying it. James remained firmly in the denial camp. When I filed for legal separation, he seemed genuinely shocked. When I requested that Eleanor not be present at doctor's appointments, he called me vindictive. When I insisted on clear boundaries for co-parenting, he accused me of using the baby to punish his family. She's going to be the grandmother, he argued during a tense meeting with our lawyers. She has rights. She has privileges, I corrected. Privileges that can be revoked when she doesn't respect the child's mother. The most surprising ally emerged in Robert, who requested to meet me for lunch 6 weeks after I left. The usually reserved man seemed older, his shoulders slightly stooped. I owe you an apology, he said after we ordered. I've watched Eleanor do this for 40 years, first to my ex-wife, then to Melissa's husband, now to you. I convinced myself it was easier to go along than to confront her. Robert looked down at his hands. Because I read what you wrote. All those incidents, laid out chronologically. I couldn't deny the pattern anymore. He paused. And because I don't want to lose my relationship with my grandchild, the way I lost my relationship with my son from my first marriage. I had known James had a half-brother. Another person Eleanor had successfully erased. Robert shook his head. Eleanor told him David wanted nothing to do with us. The truth is, she made sure David felt unwelcome until he stopped trying. That lunch changed everything. With Robert's support, I was able to establish firm boundaries for Eleanor's involvement with the baby. James, seeing his father stand up to his mother for perhaps the first time, began to question his own role in enabling her behavior. 3 months after I left, James asked to meet at a neutral location, a park near Kate's apartment. I was showing by then, my pregnancy obvious in my fitted maternity dress. I've been seeing a therapist, he said as we walked slowly along the path. On my own, not the family counselor Mom found. I've been looking at things differently. He stopped walking, turning to face me. I read everything you left. All of it. And I talked to David, my half-brother. Yes, we've met twice now. James looked away, his eyes suspiciously bright. He showed me pictures of his kids, my nieces and nephew that I never knew existed. All because I believed Mom's version of reality without questioning it. For the first time since I'd known him, James seemed to be seeing clearly. I'm sorry, Rachel. I failed you. I let Mom erase you because it was easier than standing up to her. I chose peace over truth. Over you. I know that now. He hesitated. I'm not asking you to come back. I understand why you left, and you were right to go. But I am asking for a chance to be a different kind of partner in co-parenting. To be someone who stands up for you and our child, who never lets anyone make you feel invisible again. I didn't answer immediately. Words were easy. Change was hard. But as we continued walking, James shared his concrete plans. A new house, away from his parents' neighborhood. Therapy, both individual and co-parenting. Clear boundaries with his mother, including consequences when she crossed them. I've told Mom that her relationship with our child depends entirely on her relationship with you, he said. If she can't respect you as their mother, she won't have access to them. Then that's her choice and her loss, he said firmly. I won't let our child grow up watching their mother be disrespected. It wasn't an immediate fix. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight. But it was a start. Our daughter, Lily, was born on a crisp autumn morning, 7 months after I walked out of the Caldwell house. James was there for the delivery, having earned the right to be present through months of consistent effort and respect. Eleanor and Robert met their granddaughter 2 weeks later, in a carefully controlled visit at my new apartment. Eleanor brought an expensive baby outfit, in the wrong size, and attempted to take over, instructing me on how to hold my own child. Actually, Mom, James said firmly, Rachel knows what she's doing. If she wants advice, she'll ask for it. Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. Eleanor would overstep. James would establish a boundary. Eleanor would retreat, then try again from a different angle. It was exhausting but no longer soul-crushing, because I was no longer fighting alone. Some family relationships healed. Melissa and I became genuine friends, united by our shared experience and determination to break the cycle for our children. Robert became the grandfather I'd always hoped he would be, respectful of my role as Lily's mother and protective of our relationship. Others remained strained. Eleanor never fully accepted her diminished control, though she learned to mask her resentment better. She still occasionally forgot to include me in family communications or made subtle digs about my parenting, but now there were consequences: immediate correction from James, shortened visits, and once, when she went too far, a 3-week timeout from seeing Lily. James and I never reconciled romantically. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But we did forge a new relationship as co-parents, built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to protecting our daughter from the toxic patterns that had damaged our marriage. 1 year after I left the Caldwell's house, we gathered for Lily's first birthday. It was a small celebration at a neutral location, a private room at a local restaurant. As I watched James gently correct his mother when she tried to take over cutting the cake, "Mom, this is Rachel's event," she decides. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Later, as guests were leaving, Eleanor approached me, her expression unreadable. She nodded slightly. Not quite an acknowledgement, but not a denial either. Lily is lucky to have such a determined mother. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even particularly warm. But from Eleanor, it was something close to recognition, an admission that I existed, that I mattered in my daughter's life. As I watched her walk away, I realized something important. I no longer needed Eleanor's approval, or even her acknowledgement. I had found my voice, my boundaries, my visibility, not by forcing others to see me, but by seeing myself clearly and refusing to accept anything less than respect. The invisible daughter-in-law had disappeared for good. In her place stood a woman who would never again allow herself to be erased.